Overthinkers are statistically more successful than people who just go with their gut. I know, that probably broke something in your brain just now. Because your whole life, someone, a parent, a teacher, a friend, a boss, has looked at you and said, "You think too much. Just decide. Stop making it complicated." And honestly, you believe them. You started treating your own mind like it was the problem, like that constant loop, the analyzing, the what ifs, the playing out every possible scenario at 2 a.m. was some kind of glitch you needed to patch. But here's what the research actually says. The people most likely to build something that lasts, to make decisions that hold, to understand other people at a level most folks can't touch, they're not the ones thinking less. They're the ones who can't stop thinking. And that's you. Okay, so let me just say something real quick. I've done this. I've lain awake replaying a conversation from 3 days ago, word by word, trying to figure out what felt off about it. Not because I was panicking, just because something didn't sit right and I couldn't let it go. My brain wouldn't file it away until it made sense. People would tell me, just forget about it. And I'd nod, and then spend the next 4 hours not forgetting about it. I was told that was a problem. Turns out, it wasn't. There's this whole field of psychology called metacognition, which is honestly just a fancy word for thinking about your own thinking. And research in this area shows that people who do this naturally, who can't help but examine their own thought processes, they tend to make significantly better decisions over time. Not quicker decisions, better ones. And in a world that rewards whoever moves fastest, that difference gets completely buried. But it matters. It really, really matters. Okay, here's the first thing I want you to sit with. Overthinkers aren't scared of complexity. They're drawn to it. Most people, when things get murky, when there's no clean answer, they grab the first option that feels good enough and sprint away from the discomfort. Psychologists actually have a name for this. It's called the need for cognitive closure. Basically, it's your brain going, "I hate not knowing. Give me any answer now." And look, I get it. It's efficient. But it's also where so many bad decisions are born. Overthinkers don't do that. They'll sit in the "I don't know yet" space for longer than feels comfortable. They'll turn the problem over, poke at it from a different angle, ask, "But what if?" Not because they're afraid, but because they genuinely want to understand the whole picture. Research from the University of Toronto actually found that people who can tolerate ambiguity longer tend to land on more creative and more accurate solutions. They're not stuck, they're processing. And those two things look the same from the outside, but they couldn't be more different on the inside. Here's the analogy that always gets me. Think about a chess grandmaster. They don't just make the obvious move, they sit there, they calculate. They're imagining scenarios 10 moves ahead before they touch a single piece. Nobody looks at that and goes, "Ugh, stop overthinking the chessboard." We call that mastery. The overthinker in everyday life is doing the exact same thing. We just don't give them the same credit. Now, here's one that honestly surprised me when I found it. Overthinkers are usually the most emotionally intelligent people in any room. I know, that feels backwards. You'd think all that thinking would make someone cold or overly logical, but it's the opposite. Emotional intelligence isn't built in the moment of reaction. It's built in the replay. It's built in those nights where you're going over a conversation and asking yourself, "Wait, why did that hurt? What were they actually trying to say? How were they probably feeling when they said it?" Psychology shows that people who self-reflect at a high level, which is, by the way, just what overthinkers do on autopilot, tend to score noticeably higher on empathy. They're not just thinking about ideas, they're thinking about people, about how things land, about the ripple effects of words and choices. You know that one friend, the one who always seems to get it, who asks the exact right question when you're struggling, who somehow notices something's wrong before you've said a word? Yeah, almost definitely an overthinker. Their emotional depth and their mental depth aren't two separate things. They're the same thing, just showing up in different ways. Okay, stay with me on this one because it might feel a little uncomfortable at first. Overthinking, when it's pointed in the right direction, is the engine behind almost every creative breakthrough you've ever admired. There's this concept in creativity research called incubation. It's the period when you're not actively working on a problem, but your brain is still chewing on it in the background, like it's running a process you didn't consciously open. Overthinkers live in incubation basically all the time. Their minds don't really have an off switch. And yeah, that's exhausting, I won't pretend it isn't, but it also means their brains are constantly connecting dots, spotting patterns, generating ideas that more linear thinkers would never stumble onto because linear thinkers already close the tab. Think about the entrepreneur who lies awake running through every single way their idea could fail. Sounds like a nightmare, right? But then they wake up and they've already solved 9 problems their competitors haven't even discovered yet. Or the scientist who latches onto some tiny inconsistency everyone else shrugged off and follows that thread all the way to something that changes the field entirely. The overthinker's mind isn't a hamster wheel, it's a lab. The goal isn't to slow it down, it's to learn how to run the right experiments. This next one flips the whole successful people are bold risk takers myth completely on its head. And honestly, that myth is exhausting, so I'm glad we can put it down. We're sold this image of the successful person as someone who trusts their gut, makes fast calls, leaps without looking, and somehow always lands on their feet. And sure, that makes a great movie, but studies on actual high-stakes decision-making, surgeons, traders, military strategists, consistently show that the best outcomes don't come from pure gut instinct. They come from what researchers call deliberate risk assessment, which is again a fancy way of saying thinking it through. Overthinkers are built for this. By the time they've actually committed to a decision, they've already run that decision through a mental stress test that most people wouldn't even think to do. They've imagined it going wrong. They've built the backup plan. They've asked themselves, what am I not seeing here? Their caution isn't fear, it's preparation dressed up as hesitation. And here's the little irony that I genuinely love. The overthinker who takes 3 weeks to decide something, they're usually the one whose decision actually holds. While the fast mover is already pivoted twice and is back at square one, the overthinker is quietly, steadily still on track. Let me shift gears a little because there's a softer side to this I really want to get into. Overthinking isn't just about strategy, it's about meaning. Psychology shows that people who reflect deeply on their own experiences tend to build a much richer understanding of their own lives. They know why they do what they do. They know what actually matters to them and why. They're not just drifting from one thing to the next, they're building a story that makes sense. There's a psychological concept called narrative identity, the idea that we understand ourselves through the stories we construct about who we are and where we've been. Overthinkers are constantly working on that story, revising old chapters, adding context they didn't have before, looking back at something painful and finally understanding the shape of it. That's not rumination, that's growth. And self-knowledge, real, honest, earned self-knowledge, is almost where every meaningful change in a person's life begins. And then there's this last piece that nobody really talks about, but I think it might be the most important one. Overthinkers don't just think deeply, they feel deeply. And those two things aren't separate, they're the same nerve. Research in positive psychology describes something called depth of processing, a trait where certain people are just more sensitive. A piece of music hits them differently. A look from someone across the room says 1,000 things. An injustice that other people can walk past without blinking, they can't. It sticks. And yeah, that's heavier to carry. The world is genuinely louder when you're wired like this. Disappointments land harder. But you also love more carefully. You create more meaningfully. You show up for people with an attention and a presence that most people are starving for without even knowing it. That's not a burden, that's a gift, even when it doesn't feel like one. So let me just pull this all together for a second, because I want you to actually hear this. You're not too much. Your mind isn't malfunctioning. The circling back, the I can't just let it go, the 2 a.m. scenario running, the weight you feel around decisions that other people seem to make in 5 seconds, none of that is broken. None of it needs to be fixed. What the research keeps pointing back to over and over is that deep reflection, emotional sensitivity, sitting with complexity, thinking before you leap, these aren't just okay traits to have, they're often the exact traits behind the most durable, meaningful success. We've just built a culture that celebrates the loud, fast, decisive version of achievement and completely overlooks the quiet, deep version that actually sustains it. What you need isn't less thinking, it's just a better place to put it. Journaling, creative work, real conversations, time where your brain can process without pressure. Give that mind of yours a container and watch what it builds. And honestly, the fact that you're here, watching this, thinking about your own thinking, that's already the gift doing its thing. You're not just watching a video, you're examining yourself. And that quiet, persistent, won't let it go part of you? It's not the problem. It never was. It's the whole point. If this hit something for you, if it gave a name to something you felt but couldn't quite articulate, then subscribe, because that's exactly what this channel is here for.